Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we hang around and we talk about, well, I used to say we talked about games, board games, role-playing games, card games, miniature games, and then lead into beauty. But I feel like over the last couple of weeks, I got to start with beauty and say this is a show about beauty and where we can find beauty in role-playing games. And that's my goal. That's the key here. That's the idea in the series we're going through. Now, please don't feel like I have completely abandoned the other points of the show because I am planning on doing a review of Necessary Evil here in the next couple of weeks. I've got a Chaosium review I plan on doing. I've got several other interviews scheduled. But for me, this focus on beauty and that beauty will save the world is something that's very important to me. Now, if you go back to the start of this series, we talked about how role-playing games, as a mythological gateway, can help us fight against the giants at the gates of our minds and our beings, which I identified as post-modernism, materialism, consumerism, and the last one. Go check out the video. My notes are not nearly as focused there at the start. But why is beauty so important? What else can role-playing games help us with in this idea as a mythological gateway? Going back to what excuse me. Yeah. Once again, I should have learned last time. Anyway. Stafford said that role-playing games awaken this mythological self. It renews our soul and our spirit. And I pushed back against the idea that hyper-reality, as postmodernism put it, to kind of recapitulate that. Hyper-reality is when we have all of these different veins of culture and these different voices constantly speaking into our lives. Usually through the lens of social media. I realize the irony in a person on Twitch or YouTube talking to you about the negative aspects of social media. But one of the problems with hyperreality is we have the ability to craft our culture in a way heretofore unseen in human history. When you learned the Iliad or the Odyssey, you had to memorize it and you had to retell Homer's verse as your own. When you performed a Shakespearean play, when you sang liturgy in service, you performed in an opera, these were not your truths or your realities. You had to recreate them in the way they were presented. We no longer live in a reality like that. We live in a reality where we can carefully curate all of the different pieces of culture that come into our lives. And more importantly, it becomes very easy to forget that everyone else is carefully crafting those pieces of culture for a variety of intents. Some are innocent, whereas, we just we take a dozen pictures of minis and post the best one. We post pictures of vacation because we're having a great time and we want people to see that and enjoy that. Other times it's less honestly crafted. Advertisements, influencers telling you what to buy, how to think, how to answer these questions. And what happens is we get this false sense that everyone around us' lives are so much better than ours. And if only I had what they had or did what they did or go where they went, then my life could be as happy and as cheery as theirs. Tinder and dating sites. Yes, John Doom, they did a study recently on the reason, like one of the impacts of the Tinder dating site is that a lack of contentment. You may find someone who may very well be your person. But man, there's just another 100 a couple of swipes away. What if there's someone better? God, that's depressing. And then on top of that, we have turned away from kind of the truths that we talked about that are in myths. Myths are horrid. They're depressing. They're dark. The lives of the saints are filled with trials and tribulations. The ring cycle is filled with setbacks and defeats. We don't have to deal with that in our modern age because we can just put the cheeriest and smiliest and happiest out there. And we have lost the ability to easily have examples of what to do when things go wrong, because all we're presented with is when things go right. And now I'm not talking about news, although news could be argued to be a source of culture. In fact, news goes the opposite direction. They basically tell you nothing is right in the world. But we're going to focus on role-playing games as a panacea against the overactive, always happy narratives that get pushed in our lives. C.S. Lewis once said that since it's so likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least hear stories of knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter, but darker. I think that's one of the amazing things about role-playing games. Yes, we're meeting with a community. As we talked about, we're creating culture. But this is why I tend to prefer games that have a much higher failure rate than modern sensibilities may design them. I want, as a player and a GM, to show that, man, it's not how many times you get knocked down. To quote Frank Miller in his Born Again Daredevil run, it's how many times you stand back up. And I think that's one of the beauties of role-playing games, is it teaches us in a very safe environment how to handle and how to deal with failures, setbacks, when things don't go our way. There are so many things in life that you have absolutely no control over. I think the dice do a great job of simulating that. Some people's dice are hot some days, some people's dice are not. Some people's dice continue to be cold or hot. They teach us in a safe way how to deal with grief and loss. That character that you fell in love with, maybe not even your own, dies. You're there with the group of friends that you have cultivated to deal with that grief. Sometimes you have a great plan and it doesn't go well at all. Sometimes you have no plan. Through luck and the grace of the gods, you've come through with a victory. Sometimes luck is on your side. Sometimes everything's stacked against you. This is a simulacrum I can get behind. This is a reality that as gamers, we get to engage in and see. And I think that's my big problem if I were to put modern design philosophies in... My problem with modern design philosophies, kind of in a nutshell, is that they assume that no one wants to deal with failure and that failure is always a bad thing. Setbacks are a bad thing. Character death is a bad thing. And in doing so, are we stripping away one of the beautiful engagements with our mythology that we no longer have? We talked about how the Iliad was used to help process trauma from soldiers coming back from war. Again, we talked about Achilles in Vietnam. Again, I'm not saying that RPGs are therapy, but they can be very therapeutic. Yes, John Doom, and sometimes your dice ace and you get a 59, but not on a damage roll. That would have just obliterated everybody. It was a very solid. We saved the attack roll there. And why do we go away with this? Why do we allow this to fall to the wayside? Why do we assume that these stories that we tell ourselves should have no meaning beyond always succeed, get more powerful, rinse and repeat. I honestly wonder if that's possibly not one of the reasons that the average campaign lasts 6 sessions. Because it's not difficult, and everything in life worth doing is difficult at certain points. And I found an answer in kind of one of the most unexpected places. Reading The Silver Key with my son, a Lovecraft story about Randolph Carter, and I came to this: calm, lasting beauty comes only in a dream, and this solace the world has thrown away, when in its worship of the real it threw away the secrets of childhood and innocence. And then Randolph Carter talks about going back and writing his novels. And when he began once more of writing books, which he had left off when dreams first failed him, here too there was no satisfaction or fulfillment, for the touch of earth was upon his mind, and he could not think of the lovely things he had done of yore. Ironic humor dragged down all the twilight minarets he had reared, and the earthly fear of improbability blasted all the delicate and amazing flowers in his fairy gardens. The convention of the assumed pity split mawkishness on his characters, while the myth of an important reality and significant human events and emotion debased all his high fantasy into thinly veiled allegory and cheap social satire. Thinly veiled allegory and cheap social satire seems to be the name of the game in many design circles today. And I think that robbing us of agency, robbing us of failure or the potential for failure in these design principles leaves us to a shallow experience in gaming. The Iliad is still important today because of the way it handles the traumas of war and loss and death. The story of the Gospels are filled with the overcoming of death. Again, we talked about how most of our myths revolve around someone standing up and saving their village, their kingdom, or the world. That's the story that we engage in every time we game. Where would Lord of the Rings sit if Frodo never had any failures or temptations? Or they never lost Boromir? Yes, I'm saying they can be therapeutic. TC, thanks for joining us. But they are not therapy. Anything beautiful in our lives is therapeutic because it enchants us, it renews us, it causes us to be dissatisfied with the way the world is and want to make it better. But in the end, role-playing games, as mythology does, allows us to sit with negative emotions. It allows us to sit with negative outcomes. It allows us to sit with deaths in a safe space surrounded by friends and stories that we love. I will end with this last little bit. I showed my son Terminator 2 over the weekend, and he loved it. It's the story that touched him when the Terminator has to die at the end to prevent Skynet from coming around. And we're sitting there, me with tears in my eyes, him bawling as Arnold gets lowered down into the molten metal. And I was sitting there watching my son in a safe way learn to deal with things like death, grief. I know now why you cry. I think role-playing games in a very participatory and yes, positive form, Realm Builder, allow us the space to learn to deal when things go wrong. I've been at tables with people who are learning that in real time. I sense their frustration and their outbursts. I've seen it. And I've watched friends walk them back, console them, comfort them, give them advice, fatherly advice in some cases, motherly advice in others, friendly advice. And I've watched people mature at the game table. And that's the process of maturation. We don't mature mentally or emotionally unless we're challenged and confronted with things that don't go our way. So, 2 episodes of this left. One more sort of on the sadder side of things. The role-playing games as a inoculation against materialism and consumerism. And then the last one will be role-playing games as a mythic renewal, which is kind of what Realm Builder's talking about here. Escapism in its most positive form. Escapism, as Tolkien said, not as a coward from a battle, as a prisoner looking through a window and longing for freedom. So that's it. That's our show for today. Nice, small and tight. Apologies for not being here on Thursday, and apologies to my wonderful co-host Evan for exploring Glorantha. We will be doing Exploring Glorantha this Saturday. Just had some health issues that came up, and I got to deal with those as they roll. So, until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen, and I will see you all on Thursday. Until next time, have a good one.